So welcome all to OER week. We typically do OER weeks in the fall semester as well as the spring semester. For this week, I'm starting us off with understanding what zero textbook costs are in the use of OER. On Tuesday, it's how to OER. So this would be a hands-on guide on finding OER materials for your course. The idea is we're kind of scaffolding the information that we are providing for you guys. So mine is the introduction. I will be posting the PowerPoint presentation here in the chat in just a little bit. The presentation that you will have received in the chat actually has some hyperlinks to OER repositories. So that will help you for Tuesday. Tuesday, the idea is to expand on that. And then on Wednesday, it would be free homework solutions, the tools for today's classroom. So this would be more of an integrated platform for OER. So that would be like LibreText, Adapt Studio, My Open Math 5, H5P, Canvas quizzes as well. And then on Thursday, it would be planning your course for OER. The idea is we're scaffolding the information that we have. So come Friday, you should have a really good idea of what OER versus what ZTC is, and then have the tools needed to start your OER journey. Here at Madera Community College, we are kicking off this week with our OER basics and accessibility. So Madera faculty, there is a self-enrolled Canvas shell for OER basics and accessibility that faculty can start. Reedley College has their own version, so does Fresno City as well as Clovis. So if you are interested in taking the OER basics and accessibility training courses, please reach out to your OERI leads at the campuses. And if you don't know who your OERI leads are, at the end of the PowerPoint presentation for today, the information of who your OERI leads are is posted. All right, welcome all. There is a few of us in the chat. For those that did not get an opportunity yet, please make sure to type in your first and last name into the main chat with your primary location. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and shift out screens. Can you all see the presentation? Understanding Zero Textbook Cost ZTC courses through the use of Open Educational Resource, otherwise known as OER. Awesome. Okay. For those that are here right now, the presentation is also going to be posted in the Zoom chat. And then, Susie, if you could please drop in the YouTube link for Fresno City's professional development. Thank you. For those who are interested, Fresno City does post a lot of our videos. So if you click on that hyperlink, that will take you to Fresno City's YouTube page. All right, so the goal for today is we're going to go through legislation. Legislations is pretty much what the driving force is for OER, particularly in California community colleges. There's been some updated changes to the legislation, so I'm going to cover that first. And then we're going to talk about what is zero textbook cost, otherwise ZTC. What is open educational resources, which is OER. I want to make sure that when I use the term OER, it does mean open educational resources, not online educational resources, which are two different things. So we're going to talk about how to tell if it is OER or not OER and what you can do with OER. In the presentation itself, towards the end, there are several slides with information of OER repositories of where you can find them. Madera also has its own. Each of the colleges are kind of building their own as well. So when it comes to legislation for a zero textbook cost degree grant program, this one basically identifies what the definition is of OER, or this one is open educational resources, which means high quality teaching, learning, and research resources that reside in a public domain. What that means with a public domain is it can actually have a licensing of a public domain itself, or it can have an open educational resource licensing from the Creative Commons. So essentially what this is there is intellectual property rights that is allowable that permits the individual to freely use and repurpose other materials that faculty have created. This might include what are legally available and free of cost to students. Open educational resources includes, but are not limited to, full courses, course materials, modules, textbooks, faculty-created content, streaming videos, tests, software, and other tool materials or techniques used to support access to of knowledge. So the OER movement is a growing movement worldwide where we have individuals not only from California, but across the United States and including across the world that freely share information and knowledge. If you want to know more information regarding OER and the different types of licensing available, you can always send me an email and I can share with you my presentation on the different licensing guidelines for OER because licensing does actually matter for legal purposes.
72085.
So aside from what defining open educational resources, the guidelines also state what a zero textbook cost degree is. So the zero textbook degree means community college associate's degree or career technical education certificates earned entirely by completing courses that eliminate conventional textbook costs by using alternative instructional materials and methodologies. So that could mean using open educational resources. It could also mean using other things that we as an institution might pay for, but the cost of the materials are not being paid by the student. So the zero textbook cost degree might include low cost degree option. So this would be in self-service that is $40 plus tax to students through the Follett dashboard. And if there's no equivalent cost options available, it cannot be developed. So in this case, there is some provision in the state law that allows college campuses to purchase textbook sets for classes as well. Since we as an institution are providing for the textbook, we are not having the students pay for it. That is still considered a ZTC. And we'll go through the different permutations of how ZTC looks like as well. So these two are part of the same legislation that the California Community Colleges introduced about 5 years ago with the goal of eliminating zero cost to our students. So this is something that State Center Community College has been actively doing. It is also being reflected on various college websites as well as the textbook adoption portal or self-service. So the different permutations for zero textbook costs comes out of XB12, which is MIS reported data that we as an institution have to report to the state. So this is based on faculty members' textbook adoptions. So it really depends on how your textbook adoption process is. It could be that you have a faculty member that leads a department that does your textbook adoptions, or it could be that you're responsible for your own textbook adoptions. Just be mindful that these are the criteria that is being asked for. So if you are using an OER or a combination of, please make sure to note that in case we do actually have to ask you for that information. So in terms of XB12, when it comes to the different criteria that it asks for, first one is has no associated course material. Typically, this would be if you're not asking them to buy a textbook. Sections had course materials costs, none of which are passed on to students. So you're asking, you're using a textbook, but they don't have to buy the textbook themselves. Section has a low cost text materials. So in our district, we define this as $40 plus tax to students. The reason why it's $40 plus tax is the city of Fresno has a different tax bracket compared to the city of Madera. That's why it's $40 plus tax to students. It would also be sections that use only no cost. So this is just strictly OER materials being used. Sections only have no cost digital course materials that does not meet OER guidelines. and I'll go through more examples of what each one could look like. There are also sections that use a combination of no-cost OER and also cost-bearing resources, but none of which are passed on to students. Or the section does not meet no cost or low cost materials, meaning it is a traditional textbook that is costing more than $40 plus tax to students. So that's actually the state guidelines that we have to do in terms of reporting to the state chancellor's office. So what that means is, if we have a section that has no associated course materials, this would be where we don't require a textbook, such as like our PE, for instance, or some of our work experience does not require a textbook. So that is what should be marked. Sections that have course materials that the costs are not given to the students. An example would be in human services, we have a grant specifically paid for textbooks for our students. We provide the textbook to our students as a digital loaning program through the library. Essentially, for us, what that means is we have textbooks that we have copyright materials on. We have enough copyrighted textbook materials to offset the number of students that we have in our enrollment. So each semester, they are giving access using a hyperlink to the scanned textbook, and they cannot download it. And the licensing gets removed after the end of the semester, so they don't have access to that link anymore. That will ensure that we are maintaining our compliance with copyrighted materials. Students cannot download it for their own personal use. It's only during the semester use. So for us, it is a cost that we bear as a department. Our students don't have to pay for it. So that meets XB's 12 letter C standards. Sections that has low cost material costs, this would be defined locally. So this would be an example of where a student has to buy a textbook, whether it's a physical textbook or an online textbook, but it doesn't cost more than $40 plus tax to students. So an example of this would be our Philosophy 1C course. Their textbook, their reading book that they have to buy is $15. Now, if it's an English class, if you have multiple novels that you ask them to buy, just note that it adds up. It's not under $40 per item, it's for the entire class. So if you have 3 textbooks or 3 novels that you're asking them to buy, each one are all under $10, then you meet the low cost designation. If they are a total of more than $40, then unfortunately you do not meet the low cost designation. There are sections that use only no-cost OER materials. So in this case, this would be the textbook in our psych classes that we use through OpenStax. The materials itself has an OER licensing guide to it. Sections that use only no-cost digital course materials that does not meet OER guidelines. An example would be when you have faculty members curate materials through like the library. The library databases, we do pay for it, but the cost is not offset to our students. So this would take time for a faculty member to curate it. It is not openly licensed, so the materials that are being provided are copyrighted materials, but it's through our library, for instance. So it's not that our students have to buy it, they just have to access it through our portal, and the faculty put together that information. And then the last one is section uses a mix of no cost OER and other cost bearing resources, but no cost are passed on to our students. So our example would be in our Addiction and Studies program, our Addiction and Studies class, the Introduction to Addiction and Studies, has OER materials coming from the state actually for licensing purposes. And then we also have an assigned textbook for them that we as a department purchased. So it meets the no cost OER and then also other cost bearing, but our students don't have to pay for it because we provide them with the digital access. That is a lot of coding. Right now, Follett is not able to handle this particular information, but I did want to let you guys know because this is actually part of the state guidelines that we as OER are supposed to be reporting. So basically, in a nutshell, this is what XB12 looks like, what you can and cannot do. but you do have the slides for it. Should there be a change in how we adopt, we will definitely send this information out. But right now, Follett is not ready to do this type of request yet. We have to. They're just not there yet. So this one came out, and I do want to let faculty know this is on the radar because it's been out for about 9 months now. This is the new cost transparency requirement. It had an effective date of January 1st, 2025. This says that we have to predominantly display by means that include a link to a separate internet web page that provides the students an estimated cost for each of their courses that are required materials. So not only does this piggyback on the open educational resources and XB12 guidelines that we have to do, this now also tells us that if you are asking students to buy like a scientific calculator or goggles, for instance, it needs to be transparent somewhere on the student's schedule. This is something that the state SECD administration need to work on. This is something that as OER, we already have information on this, but the other types of materials like calculators, goggles, lab coats, for instance, it's not part of OER, but they want us to start including that information for our students. My recommendation for that, if at all possible, put it into your course notes when you do your schedules. So our IAAs have an ability to actually type up notes. So when the students click on that schedule, they can identify what all is being required for that course. It'll start to get us there, but it does not necessarily 100% address what this new requires us to do, but it's one step closer to being transparent with our students in terms of the cost of the course. So right now in self-service, just looking at open educational resources, zero textbook cost, you might see some of these symbols. So if you see the $ with a plus, that means there are additional fees. This could be people that have to buy like art supplies, for instance, might have that icon. And the low cost designation is the blue arrow pointing downwards. That means $40 plus tax to students. And then if it's a zero textbook cost, now zero textbook cost could be class sets that are being purchased that students don't have to buy. It could be OER. It could be a mixture of openly licensed, zero cost bearing course options. Basically, it's one lump area. So if you have a course that does not require a textbook for students to purchase, you'll have the zero textbook cost logo if you adopted correctly. If you are using OER, you will have the zero textbook cost label on your schedule. If you have a class set that you are providing students the access, they don't have to pay for it, you will have the zero textbook cost icon. These particular icons show up in self-service. Students are actually aware what these symbols mean. They are actually looking for zero textbook cost in terms of registration. And if there is no logo on the course schedule, that would mean that that particular cost of the course is $40 plus tax to students or higher. I do want to preface that if you are marking your course as a ZTC, please make sure that it is a ZTC course or an OER course. I get complaints from students who register for classes that have the zero textbook cost logo, but then when they came to first day of instruction, their faculty told them, no, you have to buy this platform, and then that is no longer a zero textbook cost. And it's very misleading to our students, and a lot of our students do actually have to watch their finances in terms of what they can and cannot afford for classes. So we want to make sure that we are very transparent and clear why we're adopting for this, and making sure that if we're saying that this is a zero textbook course, that it is truly a zero textbook course. Now, if it's a class that requires a calculator, for instance, check with the libraries to see if they have a loaning program. So for us, our math department, we have an OER in Math 11. We have OER in our calculus course. To help get us into zero, we actually provided our math department with some scientific calculators, graphing calculators that students can check out for the semester to truly move the degree into zero textbook cost. We do not have enough calculators for every single student, so we're really asking students that if you truly need it, use the library resources, but it's on a first come, first serve basis. All right, so what is ZTC? Zero textbook cost is one of the ones that uses learning materials that the cost to the students is $0. This would be using current library materials. It could be using online educational materials such as websites, videos, tutorials. Essentially, really what we're telling students is zero textbook costs, or ZTC. So right now, that means that students don't have to pay out of pocket to buy a textbook if you ask them to. This could also mean if you're not asking them to use a textbook, that it is, you can also mark it as a ZTC. So all OER are zero textbook costs, but not all zero textbook costs are OER. OER has to have its own licensing. So examples of ZTC could be courses that do not require a textbook to be purchased. Our PE department does this because they don't need a textbook. Courses that the college has provided the textbooks. Courses that only uses openly licensed materials. Courses that use only no-cost digital course materials, typically curated through the library and online databases. And then courses that use a mixture of no-cost OER and other cost-bearing resources. But again, the students don't have to pay for it. Open educational resources are materials that can be used and reused freely at no cost. Unlike conventional copyrighted materials, OER materials creators retain few, if any, ownership rights. So for this one, it really depends how the licensing is set. The reason why we need to know what an openly licensed educational material is it allows us to either adopt as is, curate the materials, mix and match, but it really, again, depends on the licensing. So examples of licensing could be anything that has CC BY, that means it is a Creative Commons license. This would be an indicator that it is an open educational resource cost. Notice that public domain is at the top, so there are few materials that are actively being created that might retain a public domain use. That means you can freely use, do whatever you want to with it. Some of the information that are historical through the Library of Congress will have a public domain licensing on it. The ones that have CC BY, these are the ones that identify openly licensed. The reason why the CC BY NC/ND licensing is not considered OER, it's because while the material is created as openly licensed, it is very restrictive. It means that you cannot mix and match. You cannot remove a portion of it. You have to use it as a whole. So typically in the open community, a license that has CC BY NC is the most strictest and not OER friendly as possible because you have to use it as a whole. You can't modify, you cannot chop, you cannot alter, you cannot mix and match. But the rest of these allows you some rights. So if it has a CC BY, that means it's an open license. You can do whatever you want to with it. What we ask for faculty who create content, especially for Madeira, that they should put in a CC BY essay. So the idea is somebody can take the OER material that you have created and then put in that licensing, and whoever else adopts it means that they have to share alike. It allows them to create the material, but then they have to put in any kind of modifications, curations, adoptions, changes. Will also have to carry a CC BY license at the minimum. A CC BY NC just means that it is an openly licensed material. However, it cannot be commercially sold. This one can get kind of tricky. So at State Center Community College, when you create an OER content, you can put a CC by NC, but that does not mean that it cannot be printed. So a CC by NC allows the bookstore to print it at cost with a minimal fee attached to it. So typically with OER, this is online materials that we put together. We post it as an online link. That's how a student can get access to it for free. Now, if a student chooses to print this, we can work with the bookstore that the student can pay for the printing cost and a minimal fee attached to it. Most of us, when we do the CC by NC, the idea really is preventing other commercial entities taking our OER material, doing a little bit of tweaking, and then selling it on their platform to make money. We've seen that in some platforms where openly licensed materials have been created. They've done a little bit of tweaking, and now it becomes here, we can sell this material for a fee, typically cheaper than a publisher fee, but it's still charging the students a cost to buy that textbook or that particular platform. So for some folks, they choose to do the CC by NC. CC by NC just means that you have a license that is share alike, but it cannot be commercially sold. CC by ND just means it's a non-derivative. You have to use it as is. So if you want information on the various forms of licensing, you are more than welcome to send me an email. I can send you my presentation on it. And I think, Susie, is the presentation that I did on licensing, is that on the YouTube page for Fresno City's professional development?
Your slides, you mean?
I think I did the presentation last semester.
Quite possibly, yeah. Let me look.
Okay. And then for folks who are just coming in or had come in while I already had started, if you could please type in your first and last name into the main chat in the primary campus that you are a part of. For part-time faculty, it is really important because that's how we get information on who participated. So there could be some compensation for your participation today. So there are a lot of things that you can do when it comes to licensing. Each has their own advantages. In some cases, there are some restrictions. So really be mindful of when you look for OER materials, what is allowable, what is not allowable. For those that have a CC BY, you can pretty much do whatever you want with it. That's kind of the nice flexibility of OER. But as we get more icons into it, it becomes more and more restrictive. For those that came in just a little bit later than this official start time, I am posting this particular presentation to the chat so you can download and save it for your records. This will provide you with some hyperlinks to online repositories. So why OER? There are many reasons for OER. One of it is affordability. Students get to save money. With the new law, essentially what it's telling students, what it's telling education to do with students is students must have access to their online course, or their students must have access to their course materials on day one. With OER, you don't have to worry about that. When you ask students to buy a textbook, if they are able to financially afford it, that's not an issue for those students. But for some of our students, most of our students, they have to wait till their financial aid comes in. So financial aid pays at different intervals. So they might receive their money a month into the semester before they can purchase their textbook. So the idea really is students get access to their textbook or whatever resources that we're using for that class on day one, and that's where OER ZTC comes in handy. It is very flexible. We can redistribute, reuse the content, but that depends on the licensing. It is customizable. So for a lot of my classes, I do use OER materials, and then in instances where it fits appropriately, I will actually provide information regarding Central Valley or Fresno or Madera to make the topic relevant so the students can actually see a tie-in. How does this fit within the community? With OER, it allows us to provide up-to-date information. So instead of waiting for the authors of the textbook to edit, we can actually do it ourselves and making sure that we are providing up-to-date examples. For sociology, for instance, because society is so dynamic and there's just been so many changes, having that freedom of OER allows me to be really receptive to what is changing and providing the students that information, that context. Accessible. This can be more accessible than print copies because if you want to do fancy, you can embed videos of instruction within the content. You can do a H5P add on to your course that provides some plug and play. It can also provide some different ways for the student to engage in the materials. It is beneficial to all because everybody has access to information. And at the end of the day, students will have access to the content on day one. So they're not having to catch up on their reading a month into the semester because they had to wait for their financial aid check before they can buy their textbook. So when using open educational resource, you might hear the terms adaption or remix, curating, creating, or adopting. It's just different ways to identify what it is that you're doing. With adoptions, that just basically means you are using one or more pre-existing works out there. You might have to do some minor tweaking, but for the most part, the content is already created. There are plenty of repositories available that already have plug and play OER materials that you can use, and you might just need to do some minor tweaking. With adaptation or remixing, this requires a little bit more work on your end, but you get to custom create what it is that you want. So for instance, in our introduction to psychology class, the department as a whole primarily uses our OpenStax introduction to psychology. The way that I teach my course, I don't actually go by the way that the OER is organized. I organize it in a manner that I move the topics around to scaffold on that information. So there is a build of knowledge. Curating means that you are collecting separate pieces to create a cohesive whole. So in this case, you might have 2 or 3 or more open educational resources that you are using to meet the course outline of record content. I am actually currently doing this for my crime and deviance class. I'm creating one because I'm looking at it from a psychological perspective, a sociological perspective, and a criminological perspective. And that particular book does not exist that has the 3 different perspectives. So I'm actually pulling from 5 different OER materials to create a course outline of record with the materials that matches the topic that I would like for my students to learn. It does require a lot of work, a lot of planning, and you want to make sure that you are clear in terms of your intentionality of what you're trying to do, making sure that you are meeting your course outline of record, your course objectives, and your student learning outcomes because they all have to tie in together. And then last but not least, there is creating your own content. So creating your own content means you're starting from scratch. We have some faculty members who like to create their own content. So here in Madeira, our crim faculty is big on creating his own criminology content. So our crim department actually is largely going to be composed of openly educational materials that the faculty actually created themselves. Because for them, it aligns with the theoretical perspective, but it also incorporates what is happening in the Central Valley when it comes to policing techniques, the resources that are available within the area. If you are looking to adopt, which if you are new to OER, this is not a bad start. There are several reasons why you want to adapt or curate our resources. If you're starting off, the easiest way is to adapt what is out there. You will get to test it out to see how the students like it. And then you can make some modifications as the semester progresses. So an example would be my Site 42, which is Statistics in Behavioral Sciences. I chose to adopt an open educational resource textbook through OpenStax, the statistics one. Got into the semester, students were excited that they don't have to buy a textbook. It's the stats class after all. They didn't even want to be there. let alone having to pay money for the book. So the fact that it was free, they were happy about it. Got into the third week of the semester, realized that this is not really a good textbook for the class and how I taught. So by week 3, week 4, we scrapped that original book. I started to create my own content using information from that stats book with some modifications. So I was building as I went. It was definitely a lesson learned, but it was free to students. So like being able to just switch out a textbook really quickly that is openly licensed doesn't cost the students any money at all. Can you imagine if you ask the students to buy a textbook, it costs $100, and then like week 3 into the semester, it's not the textbook that you really like. And then you're telling students, oh, sorry, this is a bad textbook. I want you to buy this one instead. As a student, I'd get pissed. This one, it was a no stakes change. It put more work on me, but at least the students did not get affected in terms of the cost. So the easiest way to start is look for the different repositories that are currently out there. There's so many. While the slide has a bunch of listings, that is not even remotely close to a comprehensive list of OERs that are out there. So look at your course outline of record in great detail. What is the course outline saying that you need to cover? What is this course objectives? What is the student learning outcomes? Because the idea is you want to find materials that really is in line with what your course outline is, and then identify, are there any holes that the OER does not cover? If there are holes, where can you go to find to address those holes? So the idea is looking at it from a backwards design. What do I want the students to get out of it? And then work backwards to find material content that will provide that particular information, or maybe work on curating it. Collect as many of your resources as possible. In this case, I like to use spreadsheets. You can put it on a spreadsheet. You can do a Word document and then identify where you can get that information from, what resources are available, what topics do they cover in that particular OER, what you can pull for, and what you need to still find. So then decide which is the best platform for you to create your content in. You can use Microsoft Word, you can convert it to a PDF, you can build it into Canvas pages. If you want to do LibreText, that is an online digital platform. There is some learning curve associated with LibreText, but once you actually learn how to do it, it's actually quite easy. But the idea behind that is really keeping accessibility in mind. So there are some pros and cons depending on what it is that you choose. So for me, primarily, I like to work out of Microsoft Word, because then with Office 365, I can share out the link to that particular page or that book. And with Office 365 Online Immersive Reader, it will actually read the contents on the screen for the students. So that's kind of a nice tool. You can also find that in Canvas Pages if you build in the content in Canvas Pages. The limiting in terms of Microsoft Word, if you want to insert a YouTube video, it doesn't play natively in Word, but if you do it in Canvas Pages, you can embed a YouTube video in it, or you can embed a Panopto video into it, or a Canvas Studio video into it. Whereas Word, you can only provide the hyperlink. PDFs can be restrictive, but it allows the student to download it. If you build it in Word, run the accessibility checker first in Word, convert it into a PDF, then run the accessibility checker in PDF as well. So you want to make sure that your content is available and it is accessible. Canvas, run the accessibility checker. It's the icon that looks like Michelangelo's man at the bottom of Canvas. If there is an issue with accessibility, it will already note it as a dotted color in that bottom. LibreText has their own way of checking accessibility, so any kind of content that you create in LibreText also has to run through their accessibility checker. All right, any questions on how to start with OER? I am actually going to pull up an example of what it is that I'm doing when looking for OER content. So I start off with an outline. This particular outline is what the course outline of record says. And then from that outline, I start to scour the different OER repositories out there. And then I start to build the content based on what is available with providing of hyperlinks and the information that I'm trying to put in. So let me get to a chapter that is not built out. Go to its bottom. So this is an example of one of my modules that I need to talk about the criminal justice system. These are the items in the actual course outline that I need to cover. And then I started to build out the repositories of where that information is. So when I come down to sit and like start to pull it together, I already have a handy dandy reference to start with. And then it starts to look like an actual build chapter once I put in that information. But always start off with an outline of the very generic course outline of record, and then start to put on your notes where you're going to get that content. So when you sit down, it makes life a whole lot easier before you start to curate your content. Kind of reminds me of writing my dissertation and my thesis. Start out with a very generic outline and then start to put in the information, kind of like putting in your annotated bibliography, and then sit down and writing. All right, so everybody should have access to the PowerPoint presentations. I'm going to drop it in again in the chat for those that did not get an opportunity to download it. So this is just an example of the repositories that are available out there for OER. This is not a comprehensive list because there's so much out there. If you would like, you are more than welcome to download and start clicking on those slides so you can see what is available to you. Let's see, presentations. For those folks who did not get an opportunity to type in their first and last name into the main chat, please go ahead and do that and identify your primary campus of assignment. I will be moving forward that information to our OERI leads at the various campuses. So ASCCC Open Educational Resources actually provides information on repositories that are available that have been funded through the CCC OERI, the Chancellor's Office, essentially. You can look for things by discipline, by general education pattern, and the items that we are currently creating right now through the CCCO ZTC grant funds are going to be posted in it's going to be posted into Cool4Ed, which you have access to, that will allow you to also view materials. So there are a list of information with the resources here for OER. Another place to go is our OER Commons. So OER Commons allows you to pull information. This will also have access to some content that is fully built out. It might redirect you to Canvas Commons. And then LibreText allows you to view any form of materials that are available. If there is an OER or OER textbooks that you found in like Open Oregon, for instance, or through University of Minnesota, because they have actually a really good list of books, and you want to mix and match and remix them, you can ask LibreText to curate those materials for you, and then you can just do a click and drag to create your own book that is curated. At Madera Community College, we actually have our own area that I am actually still building. In this case, it will allow faculty to look for 0 textbook costs that our faculty have adopted through our open educational resources. We do have a list of the repositories that are available. There is one specifically for Madeira. I'm going to go into Health and STEM. So we have the OpenStax that our faculty have adopted, but we also have items in here like our Chemistry 3A, for instance. Our faculty, Dr. MacArthur, created that. So there is a link. This particular links to their book that they created in LibreText. So we have elementary statistics, which is StatC 1000 now. This one was curated by our faculty member, Cortez Howden. The OER specifically was written with Madeira or Central Valley design for statistics numbers. So it's kind of fun that it is relevant to our students. So there is a lot of resources available for OER. You just have to know where to find them. So that PowerPoint slide will give you some information on the various repositories that are available to you, but that is not all of it. If you are wanting to use openly licensed images, these are just some of the recommendations that are out there of where to go. If you want diverse and inclusive images, these are links that will provide diverse and inclusive images. And then, like I showed you guys, the Madeira Open Educational Resources. Because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we are addressing our students' needs. This is a huge equity issue for our students who can afford textbooks. So OER ZTC is a way for us to help our students address some of their educational needs here. We don't want them to worry about having to buy textbooks. Because I do know that there are some textbooks that students have to pay for that are like $230. Yes, it does have the bells and whistles of the book will read to you. There is interaction, but we as faculty can create similar content, not as flashy maybe, but at least it's free to our students. And that is one less thing that our students have to worry about, particularly since most of our students are on financial aid. Let's reduce the amount of costs associated with attending State Center Community College. So if you're not aware of who your OER leads, in Clovis, we have Stephanie Kaufman. In Fresno, we have Sally Potter. In Reedley, we have Amanda Tainter. And here at Madeira, you have me, Antoinette Izon. I am a Psych Human Services Addiction Studies program faculty. I also did sociology at one point. But I am also serving as the OERI lead here for our campus, as well as our OERI lead for the state of California. We still have about 12 minutes left. I would love to open this up for any questions or comments, discussions on OER. Anybody have any thoughts? I'm just going to do a stop share, and then I'm going to stop the recording so people can freely talk about it.